The ambush was not part of her original plan. Captain Varaya Thal, feared privateer of the Zorathian Reach, had simply intended to intercept a Terran shuttle for its cargo. But when the small craft juked past her blockade like a darting fish, instinct took over. Her crew's grapplers locked onto the shuttle, dragging it into her cruiser's belly. She strode into the docking bay with her blade spear in hand, ready for a fight, only to find a single human pilot emerging. Helmet under, one arm calm but glaring. "You've made a mistake," he said. His name was Jace Corwin, a contract pilot running a discreet delivery for the Terran Frontier Corps. He didn't flinch under the stares of the alien crew, nor when Varaya's blade hovered a finger's width from his throat. Something about that steady defiance made her pause. She had taken prisoners before, but none had looked her in the eye with such curiosity. It irritated her. She ordered him chained in the officers' quarters, not the brig. She told herself it was strategic. The next hours were a blur of interrogations, each more frustrating than the last. Jace refused to answer her questions about his cargo, and his humor made her want to snap her spear in two. "You're awfully chatty for a prisoner," she growled at one point. "You're awfully bad at being a pirate," he countered with a grin. Her crew whispered about the strange energy between them, though neither acknowledged it. Varaya chalked it up to psychological warfare. When they reached the asteroid bazaar of Vedris, Varaya intended to trade the human for information, but the bazaar's customs office, run by an overly ceremonial alien sect, insisted that all captains formally register guest envoys according to local law. She didn't read the fine print. The registrar handed her a holo stamp and recorded her and Jace's bioscans under a ceremonial bond, one that, unbeknownst to her, the locals considered a legal marriage contract. Jace found out first. Hours later, in her quarters, he leaned back in her command chair with an infuriating smile. "So, Captain, do I call you wife now?" She froze, spear halfway to its rack. "What did you just say?" He tossed her a data slate with the Vedris registry seal glowing at the top. She skimmed it once, twice, then 3 times, her crest feathers bristling. "This means nothing," she snapped. But the heat in her cheeks betrayed her. The days that followed were a nightmare of awkward formality. Every port, every station. They docked at, recognized the Vedris contract. Dockmasters bowed to them as a bonded pair, and merchants offered them discounts for starting a household. Varaya couldn't undo the contract without returning to Vedris for a ceremonial annulment, a process that could take months. Jace, of course, found the whole situation hilarious. "Hey, at least we're saving on docking fees," he said over breakfast in the mess hall. She nearly threw her cup at him. Her crew wasn't helping. Zorathian culture placed deep emphasis on oaths, and while Varaya tried to dismiss the registry as a legal fluke, her first mate, a grizzled Saurian named Kor, kept making cryptic comments about fate's designs. Worse, the crew began treating Jace less like a prisoner and more like a fellow officer. They laughed at his stories, taught him alien card games, and even let him tweak the ship's targeting algorithms. Varaya caught herself watching him work one evening, his hands moving deftly over the holoconsole, and looked away before he could notice. Their dynamic shifted again when a Terran patrol ship intercepted them near the nebula rim. The patrol. Captain demanded Jace's release, citing interstellar law. Jace, to Varaya's surprise, refused. "I'm staying here," he told the patrol officer over comms. "Long story." The human warship shadowed them for hours before breaking off, but the exchange left Varaya unsettled. Why had he stayed? One night, during a routine course correction, the ship's stabilizers failed, sending them lurching sideways. Varaya and Jace both grabbed the same support rail, their hands colliding. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. No words, just the hum of the engines and the flicker of running lights. She stepped back first, muttering something about engineering checks, but her pulse didn't slow for a long time afterward. Then came the bounty notice. A rival pirate clan, the Scythe Blades, had put a price on Jace's head. Alive. Viraya realized too late that by keeping him on her ship, she had painted a target not just on herself, but on every crew member. She told herself it was strategic necessity that made her plan his protection, but deep down, she knew it was something else. The first attack came at the edge of the Nyrus Belt. Scythe Blade skiffs emerged from the asteroid shadows, their hulls painted with crimson talons. Viraya barked orders as her crew scrambled to man the defense turrets. Jace didn't wait for permission. He dove into the gunner's seat and synced with the targeting systems he'd improved. Plasma bolts streaked through the void, shattering enemy hulls with surgical precision. She found herself glancing at his readouts, impressed despite herself. When one of the enemy ships tried a boarding maneuver, Viraya grabbed her spear and met them head-on in the docking bay. The clang of metal echoed as she cut through armored raiders, her movements precise and deadly. Then she caught sight of Jace on the upper catwalk, covering her from above with perfectly timed shots. They moved as if they'd trained together for years, each anticipating the other's next move. By the time the last attacker fell, their ship was still in one piece. After the battle, the crew celebrated, but Viraya found herself pacing in her quarters. The fight had been exhilarating, but so had the way Jace had moved with her in combat. It was dangerous, how easily they fell into sync. When he came to check on her, she dismissed him with a curt, "You fight well? For a human?" His grin in response was infuriatingly warm. The next morning, they limped into a repair dock on the fringe world of Pelvron. The dockmaster, recognizing the Vadris registry mark on their ship, offered them a private suite, free of charge, citing bonded rights. Viraya tried to refuse, but Jace had already accepted. That night, sharing the same quarters for the first time, they exchanged only a few words before the quiet settled in. The space between them felt heavier than it should. Meanwhile, rumors spread that the Scythe Blades were offering double bounty if both bonded partners were captured alive. For the first time, Viraya considered what it would mean not just to lose her ship, but to lose him. The thought lingered longer than she liked. The second attack didn't come in open space. It came in a crowded marketplace on Talvarus Prime. They'd landed to restock supplies, but the moment they split up, 3 armored bounty hunters cornered Jace in an alley. He fought them off with a shock baton one of the crew had loaned him, but it was clear they were trained to capture, not kill. Viraya arrived in time to send 2 sprawling with a single sweep of her spear, the third fleeing into the crowd. Back. Aboard the ship, she paced the bridge, her crest feathers standing on end. "You can't wander off alone anymore," she told him. "I didn't realize I needed a chaperone," he shot back, but his tone was softer than usual. He didn't argue when she assigned him an armed escort. That night, they argued in her quarters, about risk, about pride, about the damned Vadris bond. "You think this is some kind of game," she hissed. "Do you?" he countered. "Because every time you throw yourself in front of me, it sure feels like more than professional courtesy." The silence that followed was deafening. Neither admitted the truth hanging in the air. A week later, a coded message reached them. The Scythe Blades had acquired a tracker keyed to Jace's DNA. They could follow him anywhere. Viraya ordered the crew into deep space drift mode, running dark to shake pursuit. It meant days of tense, silent waiting, with only the hum of life support between them. One evening in the drift, they shared a meal in the mess hall. No crew, just the 2 of them. He told her stories of flying over Terran oceans, and she told him, reluctantly, about her first command at 17. The air between them felt different, less like captor and captive, and more like equals navigating the same storm. The deep space, Drift ended abruptly when the ship's sensors picked up a derelict freighter drifting near a collapsing micro-wormhole. The freighter's ID matched one reported missing months ago, rumored to have been carrying rare weapon prototypes. Varaya wanted to investigate, partially for salvage, partially to avoid predictable routes, but Jace immediately saw the danger. "If the Blades catch wind of this, they'll be here before we're done breathing," he warned. She ignored him and prepped the boarding crew, but not before making him part of it. "If I'm married to you," she said, voice dripping sarcasm, "you're not staying behind while I take the fun jobs." The galaxy's undercurrents grew darker as rumors spread of a coalition forming between the Scythe Blades and the Mercenary Guild. It was an unlikely alliance, but one that made sense if both saw profit in taking down Varaya's ship. She convened. Her senior crew in the strategy room, holo maps flickering with projected ambush sites. Jace stood beside her, not as a prisoner, not even as an unwanted passenger, but as an equal in the discussion. She noticed how the crew listened to him now, even when he spoke bluntly. She didn't like how much she liked it. They decided to strike first, hit the coalition before it solidified. The target was a secret meeting on a neutral asteroid station hidden in the shadow of a blue giant. The approach had to be stealthy, the escape route already mapped. Jace would pilot them in under the cover of the star's radiation pulses, a feat that required timing so precise one misstep would mean vaporization. He didn't flinch when she handed him the plan. The infiltration was smooth at first. They slipped through the station's outer defenses and docked in a service bay. Varaya led the boarding team, moving like a shadow through the dim corridors. Jace was right behind her, weapon ready. They reached the meeting chamber just as the coalition's leaders began their talks. Varaya didn't hesitate. She threw a stun charge into the room, scattering the delegates. Blaster fire erupted instantly. The chamber became a maelstrom of energy bolts and shouted orders. Jace covered her flank while she pushed forward, disabling key targets. When the smoke cleared, half the delegates were in custody, the rest fleeing into the station's depths. They disrupted the talks, but not destroyed the alliance completely. As they retreated to the ship, Varaya realized something unsettling. She trusted him in her blind spots. That wasn't part of the plan. The counterattack came 2 days later. 3 enemy ships dropped out of hyperspace directly into their path, weapons blazing. The cruiser rocked under the first barrage, alarms wailing. Varaya barked orders while Jace took the helm, spinning the ship into a defensive role. The crew scrambled to battle stations, returning fire in precise bursts. It was chaos, but controlled chaos, just the way they'd learned to operate together. One enemy ship broke off, circling wide to flank them. Jace saw the move first, cutting. Power to half the thrusters to fake engine failure. The flanker closed in, thinking them vulnerable. That's when Varaya ordered a full-power surge, flipping the ship in a tight arc and unloading every gun they had. The flanker exploded in a flash of molten debris. The remaining ships pressed harder, but their coordination faltered after losing their lead vessel. Varaya and Jace seized the moment, maneuvering the cruiser through their formation and striking at their engines. When the last enemy ship limped away, the crew erupted in cheers. After the battle, Varaya found herself in the med bay, checking a minor burn on Jace's arm. He winced when she touched it, but didn't pull away. "You're getting reckless," she said softly. "Only because you are," he replied with a half-smile. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat in her quarters replaying the battle, realizing that his recklessness wasn't just following hers, it was matching it, step for step. They finally got a lead on the private buyer who had commissioned Jace's capture. It was a wealthy crime lord operating from a drifting palace ship, guarded by layers of automated defenses and mercenaries. Varaya debated leaving the matter alone, cutting their losses and staying ahead of the Blades, but Jace insisted. "If they want me this badly, they won't stop. We end it now." The infiltration required every trick they had. Disguises, forged access codes, even hiding in a cargo shipment of luxury wines to slip past security. Inside the palace ship, opulence clashed with paranoia. Gilded walls hid reinforced plating, chandeliers hung over hidden gun ports. Jace and Varaya moved through it like ghosts, their banter quiet but steady in the comms. They reached the central chamber where the crime lord held court. The figure was massive, draped in silks, surrounded by guards. He didn't recognize Varaya at first, but he recognized Jace instantly. "The runaway prize," he rumbled, voice dripping greed. The moment he spoke, Varaya's spear was in her hand, and Jace's blaster was raised. The fight was brutal. The guards were skilled, the terrain crowded with fragile, explosive decor. At one point, Jace shoved Varaya out of the path of a plasma, Bolt taking a graze himself. Together they cut down the last of the defenders and confronted the crime lord. Varaya didn't kill him. She left him alive, stripped of resources, humiliated. Sometimes that was worse than death. On the way back to their ship, she caught Jace looking at her with an expression she couldn't name. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't victory. It was something heavier. Their final challenge came not from enemies, but from the choice of where to go next. With the coalition crippled and the crime lord ruined, they could disappear into the quieter parts of the galaxy. Jace suggested a small human colony that needed pilots, far from the wars. Varaya's crew expected her to refuse, but she didn't answer right away. The bond, both the accidental legal one and the one forged in battle, had shifted her thinking. For the first time, she considered what it would mean to stop running, to have a place. She didn't know if she could, but the thought didn't feel as foreign as it once had. Their decision was interrupted when the Blade's last surviving warship appeared on their tail. It was damaged, desperate, but still dangerous. Varaya took the helm this time, Jace manning the guns. The fight was fast, brutal, and final, ending with the enemy ship splitting apart in a silent bloom of fire. Afterward, the cruiser drifted in quiet space. Varaya stood beside Jace on the deck, watching the wreckage fade into the dark. "So," he said, "what now, wife?" She smirked at the word, but didn't push it away. She looked at him, at the crew, at the empty stretch of stars ahead. For once, she didn't feel like she was choosing between freedom and connection. "Now," she said, "we see where this road takes us." Inside, the freighter was a labyrinth of dark corridors, frozen air hissing from ruptured seals. The crew moved carefully, their boots clanging on metal. Jace took point alongside her, scanning for traps. Twice they found traces of firefights, scorch, marks, broken droids, but no bodies. It was unnerving. Then they found the cargo bay. 3 sealed crates marked with warning glyphs sat against the far wall. Before they could examine them, the ship shuddered violently. A proximity alarm blared in Varaya's comm. "Incoming craft! Multiple!" They rushed back toward the airlock, but the enemy ships were already latching on. Scythe blades. The narrow corridors turned into choke points, forcing Varaya and Jace to fight side by side again. The crates were abandoned in the scramble to escape, but the rush of combat brought that dangerous synchronicity between them roaring back. Her spear struck low, his blaster hit high, and neither missed a beat. The last blade fell, but the damage to the freighter's hull meant they had seconds to get clear before it was swallowed by the collapsing wormhole. They made it back aboard their cruiser just as the freighter was torn apart by gravitational tides. Varaya slumped into her command chair, adrenaline fading. "I told you it was a bad idea," Jace said, but there was no bite in his voice. Instead, there was that maddening grin again. She wanted to argue, to reassert her command, but all she could think about was the way his hand had found her shoulder mid-battle. Steady, certain. She told herself it was just survival instinct. Later, alone in her quarters, she stared at the data slate from the Vadris registry. She didn't know why she still had it. She could have deleted it long ago. Instead, she set it back on the table and lay down, listening to the faint hum of the ship. Somewhere beyond her walls, Jace was probably tinkering with some system he had no business touching. The thought didn't bother her as much as it should have. They refueled at a fringe world station called Karen's Reach, known for its gambling pits and backroom deals. Viraya planned a short stop, but Jace had other ideas. If we're hiding from bounty hunters, blending in is smart, he argued, dragging her into the neon-lit chaos. The crowds were thick, smugglers, mercs, traders, and for once, no one gave them a second glance. They even managed a moment at a street vendor's stall, sharing a skewer of spicy synth meat without the crew hovering nearby. The calm didn't last. A coded signal pinged Viraya's personal comm, a contact she hadn't heard from in years. The voice was gravelly, familiar. "The Blades know where you're headed, Thal, and they've got help." She didn't tell Jace right away. Instead, she kept scanning the crowd, eyes sharp. It was only when they returned to the ship that she filled him in, and he was not pleased. "You're hiding things from me now?" he asked. "Since when?" "Are we on the same side?" she shot back. The tension between them crackled like static. That night, Jace confronted her in the engine bay. "If you're going to keep me alive, let me help. Don't make me dead weight." She stared at him, really seeing him, not just as the man she'd accidentally married, not as the human she'd captured, but as someone who'd fought with her, saved her life. Against her better judgment, she agreed. He'd be involved in the next plan, fully. No half measures. Their next move was risky, a false signal broadcast to lure the Blades into an ambush zone near the edge of an ion storm. Jace's role was crucial. His piloting had to thread the storm's fringe without frying the ship. The maneuver was insane, but he executed it flawlessly, weaving through electric arcs and plasma bursts until the Blades' ships were locked in. Viraya's crew struck hard, disabling half the fleet before the rest scattered into the storm. Afterward, as the storm's glow faded behind them, Viraya found herself leaning on the railing of the observation deck beside him. "Not bad for a human," she said quietly. He smirked. "Not bad for my wife." She didn't even threaten to stab him this time. Weeks passed with no major attacks, but the silence was worse than the fighting. Every port call felt like walking into a trap, every sensor ping a possible ambush. The crew kept busy with maintenance drills, but the tension bled into every conversation. Viraya caught herself glancing at Jace more often. On the bridge, in the mess hall, even in passing corridors. It wasn't annoyance anymore. It was something else she refused to name. One evening, Jace joined her on the upper deck while she plotted hyperspace routes. "You're charting a runaround," he said, leaning on the console. "You're avoiding them." She didn't look up. "I'm keeping us alive." He studied her in silence before saying, "Maybe the problem isn't running. Maybe it's that we're running separately." The words lingered after he left. Their uneasy peace shattered when the Blades' flagship, the Ravager's Claw, appeared. On long-range scans, it was faster, heavier, and carrying enough firepower to gut a station. They couldn't outrun it, and fighting head-on was suicide. Jace proposed a desperate alternative: lure the flagship into a debris field where its size would be a disadvantage. Viraya hated the idea, but she hated having no options more. The plan worked at first. The flagship's bulk made it slow to maneuver, allowing the cruiser to slip in and out of cover. But the Blades anticipated the trap, deploying smaller skiffs that darted between wreckage like predators. The fight turned chaotic. Viraya and Jace were separated, each holding off attackers from different sides of the ship. When the last skiff was destroyed, the cruiser limped out of the debris field battered but alive. Viraya found Jace in the gunnery control room, bruised, but grinning. "We make a pretty good team," he said. She didn't argue. Repairs took them to an outpost built into the shell of a hollowed asteroid. It was a quiet place. Too quiet. The air smelled of recycled dust, and the station's corridors echoed with their own footsteps. Jace took it as a chance to breathe. Virea saw it as another trap waiting to spring. She kept her spear close and her crew in pairs at all times. Her instincts were right. On their second night, an explosion rocked the docking bay. Emergency. Shutters slammed down, trapping half the crew on the other side. Virea fought her way through smoke and debris, only to find Jace pinning a masked attacker against the wall. The assassin was no blade. They wore the insignia of a mercenary guild known for taking contracts no one else dared touch. Someone new was hunting them. They interrogated the assassin in a locked storage room. The guild had been paid to capture Jace alive and deliver him to a private buyer. The details were scarce, but the credits involved were astronomical. It meant the blades weren't their only problem anymore. Virea hated the way her stomach twisted at the thought of losing him. Not to battle, but to being sold like cargo. Leaving the outpost was tense. The crew moved fast, keeping weapons ready. Jace stuck close to her side without being told. When they finally jumped to hyperspace, the hum of the drive felt like the first deep breath in days. That night, they found themselves in the observation deck again, the stars streaming past. Jace glanced at her. "Still think this bond means nothing?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out at the stars, and for once didn't feel the need to correct him.